Yes, Brad.
How would you like to see places like Rome, Venice, Barcelona, Ibiza, Paris, and London?
I mean, I don't really understand half the things you just told me, but that sounds great.
How about visiting every single island in Hawaii in a week while only unpacking your bag once?
That sounds like an absolute dream to me, Brad.
How about exploring dozens of different destinations throughout Western Europe in a 10-day period without blowing your budget on airfare?
That sounds awesome.
All of these once-in-a-lifetime trips with once-in-a-lifetime experiences can start at altamaritravel.com, where you can book your next cruise or river cruise anywhere from the coast of the United States to anywhere in Europe or all the way in the land down under in Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. Tread, I know you'll like this. How does a big party boat with unlimited food and beverage that drops you off at heavenly destinations every day sound to you?
That sounds like a dream, Brad.
Well, it's all a reality at altamaritravel.com. Book your dream vacation for cheaper today and go explore the Altamari or the high seas today. Hey,
Right
Tread, before we take off, I wanted the great people to hear your college football take that you told me this last week.
Yes, of course. Who can forget our extensive conversation about college football that we had this week, Brad? All right.
Yep.
So
Awesome.
I've got a thought.
I wasn't invited.
Yeah, that's because, the conversation never happened. But,
This guy's he's Italian.
So me and my dad, the night before Thanksgiving, went to Kraken Sharks, which, by the way, 13 goals were scored in that game. It was absolutely bonkers. Like, it was just
Kraken Sharks, not Kraken
Yes.
Sharks.
the
Okay.
Sharks were at the Kraken at Climate Pledge Arena in downtown Seattle, which is actually it's kind of tiny, but it's kind of a sick setting.
Awesome.
Like for a night before Thanksgiving, like they were full house. Like it was crazy. Tickets are very expensive though, so that's the only downfall. But the fans, they're kind of into the Kraken right now. Sharks got mopped. It was bad. We'll keep it moving there. But anyways, before the game, me and my dad were grabbing food and we were talking sports. And I told him we were talking just kind of like the landscape of college football, right? Just to preface, obviously, UCLA and USC are moving to the Big Ten. Oklahoma and Texas are heading to the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
You can start seeing with, NIL kind of being laid bare. College football is very much a money-making enterprise. And it's slowly transitioning towards two kind of mega conferences, and everybody else is kind of fighting to see what's going to happen and where they can land as this landscape evolves. Now, I think this is where we're heading for college football, but I have kind of a twist on this idea. Okay. So what's going to happen essentially here is we're going to have a mini NFL, right? You're going to have the big brands of college football form together whatever, governing body they want, whether the SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Pac-12, 10, Pac-8, whatever it is now.
Whatever it is, yeah.
And then the Big 12, those big brands are going to all come together and form like something like a 40 to 50 team mini NFL, where you're just going to basically have like a north, south, east, west, have more divisions, and maybe you do it by conference too, like the NFL does, where you have the NFC and the AFC. But anyways, no matter what happens, like the big brands are all going to come together and form their own championship. They're going to form their own league where they're all playing each other on a regular basis. So you're going to see like Michigan play Oregon on a regular basis. You're going to see like Georgia versus, Ohio State on like a weekly basis, similar to the NFL, right? Where like you have all these teams playing each other and they're all big games. They all mean something, but you're not going to see teams necessarily run the table anymore, like going 12-0 into their conference championships, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to become very much like a for TV dollars super league type vibe for the big brands of college football. Now, what is going to happen or is going to need to happen is the rest of the brands that aren't really invited to the party are going to have to figure out their own governing body, right? So what I think is going to happen, or what I think should happen, is that Division I AA and the rest of the teams in D1 football or FBS football, FCS and FBS, now combine to become their own thing and stick with the NCAA or what have you. And they have their own championship, right?
Okay.
So you're going to have like the Super League, and who cares about what happens with D2 and D3 football? Like as a former D3 football player, I don't think the rest of the country really cares that much about what's going to happen once that separation happens.
So this is your fix for how the college football playoffs are set up.
Yes,
too.
but here's where the idea gets fun. Imagine a world where you have this Super League where you're obviously going to have teams that are not very good in this Super League and are playing kind of meaningless games towards the end of the year when they're 3-7 and have no chance at the playoff. You're going to like this twist, Brad. Imagine
I know where this is going.
There's a relegation system similar to European football, where the Super League, if you want to stay in, you need to maintain a certain standing in the record to be able to stay within that league. Otherwise, the teams below you in that new Division I AA league, their championship or playoff is essentially to play in to the Super League the next year. So like you're seeing teams like San Diego State and, you know, whoever.
Boise.
Like, Boise State or whoever, like playing
TCU probably like
their own national championship. Whereas like Arkansas has a bad year.
They
have
moved
2
down.
wins, and now if they lose their last game, they might get relegated down to that league, which now means that you're going to maintain fan attendance because those people have to come and cheer on the team, because if not, like they're going to be held accountable and sent down. So it's like, it's a good way to obviously like maintain like competitive balance within the leagues, but then it gives people like who are in kind of those lower brand teams a chance to continue to like push towards something and move up to play in that Super League potentially down the line. Now, I think too, like regardless of what happens, this NIL stuff is out of hand, right? Like people are spending a ton of money, and it's not working for everybody. Obviously, like Texas A&M has spent a buku amount of money to have the best recruits in the country, and they are 5-7, I believe, currently, right? And they've had a couple of big wins this year, but ultimately, like they're having a terrible year, and they're playing in the SEC, which is a very difficult conference to play in. So, like obviously, spending a ton of money on NIL hasn't worked for everybody, but it's going to become a point where it's just completely unregulated, and there's just a huge separation of power at the top, which there already tends to be as it is. So I think the Super League is going to have NIL rules where you like have to have like a salary cap similarly to the NFL, where it's like a hard cap on NIL. And then like, you know, so these teams like Texas A&M and Georgia and Alabama are going to be able to stay within the same NIL pool of like, you know, like Iowa and, you know, whatever, like lower tier school within those bigger brands is still going to, you know, be involved. Super excited to announce our new show sponsor, Hank B. Patterson Real Estate. I know I've known Hank for quite a long time. I couldn't be happier that he's decided to support us. Guy's an awesome golfer, very good sports take guy, huge Vikings fan. You know, he's a big sports guy. Skol.
Kirk Cousins.
So, and honestly, like me and my wife, we've been looking to buy a house recently. Like we're looking to make our first home purchase.
That's scary.
And I was it is super scary, but the first person I thought to reach out to was Hank. And whether you're a first time buyer, Brad, or you're looking for your retirement home, for those of you who listen to the show and might be interested in that, Hank has your best interest in mind before the deal, during the deal, and after the deal. And he's going to help you find your perfect home, folks. So my man Hank, big supporter of the show, all around awesome guy. Go ahead and give him a call at 503-803-7204, or you can email him at homes@hankpatterson.com. Again, that's 503-803-7204, or email him at homes@hankpatterson.com. So thanks, Hank, for supporting us. And again,
thanks,
for those
Hank.
of you who are looking for a home, contact Hank.
Skol. Tread, have you heard of, because you're basically creating like how European football works, soccer, football.
Yes.
So have you heard about the story of the Super League? It was actually called
Yeah,
Super League.
no. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah. I know what you're talking about.
So for those of you that don't know, there's a tournament every year. It's called the Champions League tournament. And basically to qualify, you have to be top 5 in your standing. So like the top 5 English teams, the top 5 French teams, the top 5 Italian teams. So top 5 teams from the top 5 leagues qualify for Champions League playoff. And it's arguably almost as like important as winning the World Cup if you can win a Champions League trophy, because it means you're the best club team, and club teams are probably overall more competitive. So a bunch of people, which obviously soccer owners extremely greedy, FIFA extremely greedy. We can get to that to another time.
We can see with this World Cup. Keep going.
Yes, but we can get into that with a deep pod sometime. But they decided to create what they called the Super League because now I could be wrong here. Shout out Garrison Crone, he'll probably correct me in the comments. But Juventus and Real Madrid, two of the biggest club in Italy and the biggest club in Spain, one of the biggest clubs in Spain, came together to form what they wanted to call the Super League. And the Super League was going to be where only the teams with the top budget or the top monetary value. So it would be 10 teams every year, the same exact teams to play each other, because their belief was nobody will tune in to see Real Madrid play Real Sociedad on a Wednesday for a Champions League qualifier, right? Like the 8th best team in Spain play the number 1 team in Spain. This immediately got like every fan in Europe started protesting. There was lockouts of games. Players had their opinions that were completely and utterly against it. And even with all that being said, they took it to a vote to the owners and it almost passed. But it was almost the death of European soccer, basically, is what they claim happened. So what you are trying to propose could be the claim. It could be the death of college football as we know it.
Well, so that's where the relegation comes in. And that was the big like talking point of the Super League, is that all the costs were going to be fixed. And it was basically Americanized like sports model into European, soccer.
You could not,
which is like European soccer has always like held itself accountable. Whereas like the best team conceivably in soccer could move down leagues if they don't maintain a good product. Whereas like in the NFL, like you're not going to get sent to the XFL if you're the Houston Texans this year and you have a terrible team. You get rewarded by having a good draft pick and you have competitive balance. And then there's a hard salary cap. So like these greedy owners, when they get competitive, and you're seeing it in NIL, right? Like these boosters, they're getting competitive. They have a ton of excess money. They're just throwing it at high school athletes and transfer portal athletes to build up their team quick, right? Which is awesome for the players, but in terms of competitive balance, like it's creating like it's really cool because like some of these lower brand teams can all of a sudden start pulling these 5-star athletes. Like look at Jackson State getting 2 of the best players in this year's class because of Deion Sanders, of course, but also like Barstool Sports is willing to donate a certain amount of money to those guys to make sure they get the bag and they're going to go play for Deion. And it's like this really cool thing.
It could be a little different. Yeah. Because of like, in European soccer, you just can't. Those teams just buy players, but in college football, it's a little different because you can recruit better. Like, good luck taking Alabama out of that. But there could be a year where these 5-star recruits are not as strong as another, and then they get relegated. That's very fun.
And I think the difference is too, like with college football versus like the NFL and the money spending. Like the NFL is very much like, and like, let's not get it twisted. Like college football is very much a money making enterprise, but like, they don't just have these like rando fans who are like, I'm going to spend $12 million of my money and donate it to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers so they can go get a wide receiver. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is like, not because the costs are all fixed in the NFL. Like you can't go outside of the hard cap. So all the owners, no matter what their spending capabilities are, like Jeff Bezos can come in and it's not going to change how he's going to be able to bring in players because he can't just throw money at them. They eventually are capped out, which is like right now in college football, like you can spend all the money in the world you want and get whoever you want because it's like fairly unregulated. Right. So like, I think that's the weird thing about like college football versus the NFL right now. But I think if you create this like made for TV league where you have the biggest brands in college football constantly playing each other, and like travel logistics now, like it's not a problem, right? Like you can fly wherever, you can bus where, like it's not, the 1970s where it's like you got to play regional football and then maybe you might go to a bowl game, right? Now it's like people are willing to travel to games. People are willing to, I mean, like logistically, it's just a lot easier to get teams to play each other. So I think it could be like a really big hit within like the general public. It obviously sucks if you're like a Washington State Cougar fan and it's like all of a sudden your team is no longer playing like for a division, but that team was never really playing for a Division I championship anyways, right?
Yeah.
So it's like now they have a shot to potentially play for something outside of like a good bowl game or like a Pac-12 championship. Like they're now like you're evening out the playing field for some of those middle tier programs.
Mhm.
And then you're letting the big boy football happen. And those big name programs are going to constantly play each other, which is going to create TV revenue. Fans are going to be locked in on going to every single game. And not that they all aren't already are, but I just see it being much more like a well-oiled machine like the NFL. But I do think there needs to be regulation because even within that model, you're going to keep having boosters just throw buku dollars at players. So
yeah, and we're verbally patent, right? Verbal patent on this.
Yes, verbal patent. I will take royalties for this relegation idea specifically, even though like the Super League for college football isn't necessarily like my idea. The relegation idea is something that I have not heard and I think would be really fun and would save potentially college athletics. Because like imagine a world where Appalachian State can play in this big league with Alabama and whoever, right? So, yeah. Folks, one of the best environments in Forest Grove is found at Black Dog Bar and Grill off of 19th Avenue between Domino's and Rainbow Lanes. At Black Dog Bar and Grill, you can enjoy a meal while listening to great music and wonderful service from a friendly staff. From lunch, dinner, to catering events, such as parties or weddings, Black Dog does it all. Brad, what's your favorite menu item at the Black Dog?
Well, Tread, I really love the street tacos. They're super authentic, and you get a great bang for your buck. I also really like the ribs and the cornbread. I think the cornbread is one of the best sides in all of Forest Grove, if not the world.
Well, awesome, man. And I'll tell you what, I really love that cornbread as well. I eat it as like a dessert with honey and some butter. Good. Are you kidding me? It's unbelievable. So everybody, stop by Black Dog today for lunch or dinner, or just enjoy the great bar they have in the back where you can watch football every Sunday or just kind of hang out. But whatever you do, just make sure you let them know the Big Tread and Brad Buffet saying Black Dog Bar and Grill. Go get it.
Kraut, do you have anything?
I've been thinking over here a little bit.
Okay.
Just a little, not too much. Thinking just a little. So you brought up a good point. Like you might be able to see Appalachian State, who's like always dominates their conference. I don't really know, but I'm assuming I see them, always succeeding. Play a team like Alabama. Like, do you lose some of the luster of like those long-term rivalries that will no longer be a thing, where like the underdog occasionally wins the Civil War or occasionally wins the Apple Cup or occasionally wins for the longest time Notre Dame and USC, which is actually a pretty even rivalry if I'm not mistaken. Notre Dame probably has that.
It's gone up and down over the last probably 20. USC dominated like the 2000 to 2010 years, and then the last decade's been crushed by Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
do you miss any of that kind of stuff? Do you miss the history of that, or do you think?
Yeah, I think
what we're gaining is just so much more.
I think like regionally, yes. Like the likelihood of like an Oregon State making the Super League, like looking at our specific example, right? Like Oregon versus Oregon State, the likelihood of Oregon State making that league is pretty low from a brand awareness standpoint and like just market share of college football. Whereas like Oregon is a much more national brand, whether you like it or not, like it is what it is. And the West Coast is going to need representation, and you're going to have a pretty small population for that. So you're looking at like Washington, you're looking at Oregon, USC, UCLA, maybe Stanford, maybe something like that, right? But ultimately, like the West is going to be driven by Texas. So, I mean, those Big 12 like powerhouses that are now moving to the SEC, those are going to be kind of considered more Western properties. So, I do think like it will be frustrating for fans in that perspective, but that's going to be tough regionally, which isn't really going to matter on the national stage of like if ESPN is like potentially, since they created this college football playoff, ESPN could essentially create this super league and like work in collaboration with CBS and Fox and whoever, and they can all come together and make this super league. And the national perspective is going to stay because like nobody, like we're watching Oregon State, but like unless it's the only thing on, like nobody in the state of Arkansas gives a care about what that looks like, right?
Or Texas or Alabama or Oklahoma.
Oregon, Washington, maybe a little more, especially if there are stakes attached. Oregon, USC, a little bit
California
more. You know
too. Yeah.
Yeah, USC, UCLA is going to still draw some eyes, even though like fans don't go to those games, but that's a whole nother conversation. So I don't know. I think you're still going to have like the Auburn, Alabamas. You're still going to have the Georgia, Floridas. You're still going to have Ohio State, Michigan. You're going to have those big rivalries on the East Coast and the South that really matter to team. Oklahoma, Texas. Like some of these bigger rivalries that are going to matter nationally are going to now be inflated because each game is going to matter. It's going to be similar to the NFL where each game feels like a playoff game, which I mean, like I guess college football right now, each game's a playoff game because if you lose one game, it's over. But you no longer have Alabama playing like Austin P week 4.
Yeah, because they'll pay for it. Yeah.
You don't have to do that anymore. You can finally like have a really tough schedule, and you're going to have a true champion at the end of it because everybody's going to play everybody. And that's what will be fun is like you'll have like a true champion and you're going to see high level football. So, I mean, I just think it's going to draw more eyes on a regular basis, and Saturdays are going to be more electric than they've ever been. Unless you're a fan of a team of some of these lower level programs, but still, like if you're playing for this championship, all of a sudden, like a national championship that you can claim, like, and again, with the relegation idea, it's like, okay, well, if we win this, we could potentially move up to the Super League and be a part of those television dollars. So I don't know.
If you have thoughts on this, listening to this, go over to our Instagram, Big Tread and Brad, and leave us a little voice message on what you think.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
We'll play it on the pod.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I think too, like right now, Oregon State Super Bowl is against Oregon. You know what I mean? Like that's the game every single year. And that's really what they're playing for, right? They haven't won. I don't know if they've won a Pac-12 championship in like the last 20 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, but go ahead.
Question is like, you look at the Pac-12 and how volatile like the teams in it are. Like, how can you say that like a Stanford or even a UCLA, who's having a much better year than they've had in the last 5 or 6 years, like deserves to be the team? I guess they're moving to the
market,
conference, right? So
it's the market.
Yeah, so they're moving to a different conference.
It's the Los Angeles market, which is one of the biggest markets in the country. Oregon has national branding. Washington has national branding.
Oregon has Nike. Is what he meant to say.
Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. But like people know about Oregon because of the brand. Like it's a big brand because of Nike for sure.
Yeah,
but nonetheless is a brand. I think the fun one is like talking about like a Utah where you're kind of like looking at the four corners and how they don't really have like a ton of like football powers. Like Utah's probably that best team in that group. So because Colorado is not gonna make it. And obviously, like, you know, some of those other teams aren't very good. And then like the Arizona State conversation, like, are those teams in the mix?
Yeah.
Those are things you got to think about. Because I mean, even ASU and Arizona have had up and down like programs over the last 10 to 15 years. But I think too, it comes down to how many eyes are you going to get on the television for these matchups.
Tread, what's your death row meal?
Honestly, Brad, I don't even think it's a question. My favorite meal on earth, besides Chipotle on a travel weekend, of course, is the Treadway at Phil's 1500 Subs in Forest Grove between Godfather's Pizza and Safeway.
Oh, really? What is on a Treadway?
Well, Brad, I'm glad you asked. The Treadway typically comes in the large variety. It is chicken, bacon, Yoshida's, Chipotle mayo, and Swiss. I could recommend adding like some mushrooms and maybe, some grilled onions occasionally, depending on what kind of vibe you like. But
let's not get crazy.
Essentially what you got on a Treadway.
Mm-hmm.
And Brad, let us add that it's on one of the best whole wheat rolls of bread on earth that they make homemade the morning up. So, I mean, not to mention that Brandon, Phil, and Merrill are some of the best people in the area. I'm talking the whole Portland, like general area.
All of it.
They're going to make your day every time you step into the shop. So the next time you're in Forest Grove, Brad, and everybody who listens to the pod, I'd stop by Phil's 1500 Subs or even call for catering and just say the Big Tread and Brad Buffet sent you.